My name is Rowan Hale, and 7 years ago, I promised myself I'd never set foot in my hometown again. Not for birthdays, not for holidays, not even for my parents' anniversary. They made sure I understood I didn't belong. But when the call came, 3 clipped sentences from a stranger telling me my father was gone. I put in for emergency leave, pressed my uniform into a garment bag, and booked the next flight east. I didn't expect a welcome. I didn't expect kindness. But I also didn't expect to be ambushed before I even reached the church steps. Lydia, my sister, was waiting at the top of the stone stairs, framed by the heavy wooden doors. She was dressed like a senator's wife, sleek black coat, pearls hair swept into a perfect chignon. A half-circle of people hovered around her, smiling at every word. The moment her eyes met mine, something sharp flashed there. Then her lips curved into a smile I knew too well. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence," she said, her voice carrying easily over the murmurs of the crowd. The useless soldier finally made time for her family. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was enough. A few people looked away. Most didn't bother. I felt my jaw tighten. My boots were still on the last step, my gloved hand wrapped around the cold rail. For a moment, I thought about turning around and leaving. Instead, I lifted my chin, walked past her without a word, and pushed open the heavy door. The scent of polished wood and funeral flowers hit me like a wall. Somewhere inside, the service was about to begin, but I already knew this wasn't going to be a funeral. It was going to be a battlefield. The sanctuary was packed, every pew filled the air heavy with lilies, and something more artificial perfume layered over politics. The vaulted ceiling carried every whisper, every rustle of clothing, as though the church itself was eavesdropping. I slipped into the last row, keeping my hat on until I sat. From here, I could see Lydia at the front, orchestrating every movement like she was chairing a board meeting. The casket rested just beneath the altar, draped in the flag my father had earned through decades of service. Only it didn't feel like his day. It felt like hers. She'd branded the entire service with the insignia of Heritage Valor Foundation, her veterans support nonprofit. The foundation's deep blue banners flanked the casket embroidered in gold thread, serving those who served. I doubted my father ever approved that slogan, but he couldn't object now. The pastor offered a prayer, his voice low and warm, then invited Lydia to speak. She rose with practiced grace, touching the corner of the casket before turning to face the congregation. "My father believed in service," she began, her voice steady, but with a catch that sounded rehearsed. "He taught us, both of us, that giving back to those who sacrifice is a duty we never outgrow." She let the pause linger, then glanced toward the back where I sat. Some of us chose community work. Others took a different path. A ripple passed through the room, like wind through tall grass. She didn't need to say my name. I was the only one in uniform, the only one sitting alone. I kept my eyes forward, jaw set. When the slideshow began, I hoped maybe, to see at least one picture of us together. My father and I had a dozen moments worth remembering: the day I left for basic training, the medal ceremony after my first deployment fishing trips, where we barely caught a thing but stayed out until sunset. But the images on the screen told a different story. My father as a boy, holding a fishing rod next to my grandfather. My father in dress whites, shaking hands at an awards dinner. My father holding infant Lydia. My father at Lydia's wedding, at her charity galas, at her ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Not one photograph with me, not even in the background. A murmur rose near the front, someone complimenting a shot of my father beside a senator. Lydia smiled, leaning down to whisper back. She looked pleased. When the final slide faded to black, the pastor closed his notes. The service had lasted less than an hour, but it felt like a performance that had run far too long. People began to stand, filing out toward the side courtyard, where a reception waited under white tents. I stayed seated until the aisle was clear, then rose slowly, my gloves creaking as I pulled them tighter. Whatever this was, it wasn't about honoring my father. And if Lydia had turned his funeral into a stage, I needed to know why. I didn't yet realize the answer would come to me before the day was over. The courtyard was dressed like a wedding. White tents stretched across the lawn, strung with warm lights despite the afternoon sun. Waiters in black vests wove through clusters of guests, balancing trays of sparkling water and delicate hors d'oeuvres. I stood near the refreshment table, a safe distance from the inner circle Lydia kept orbiting. She moved from group to group, shaking hands, smiling just enough to seem humble, laughing at comments she likely didn't hear. A man in a dark navy suit approached me. His hair was silver-cut to regulation length, and his handshake was firm. "You're Rowan," he said quietly. I nodded. "And you are Frank Harris. Your father and I served together." He told me once, if anything happened. Harris paused, scanning the crowd before leaning in. "You'd know what to do." I felt my brow knit. "What do you mean?" But Harris only gave a tight smile. "You'll figure it out. Just don't wait too long." And then, as if on cue, someone called his name, and he was gone, disappearing between the tents. Evan found me seconds later, 2 glasses of lemonade in hand. "You okay?" I shook my head. "Not even close." We left before the casket was lowered. I couldn't stand another minute of Lydia's staged grief. That evening, at a small roadside motel far from the reception, Evan handed me a thick navy envelope. This came to our old address. Forwarded through my unit's admin desk. Certified mail. The embossed return address read Connolly Grant and Wells, Estate Law. My chest tightened before I even opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper in my father's blocky handwriting. Rowan. If you're reading this, it means things ended the way I feared. There's a safe in my Midtown apartment unit 302. The keys in your old field jacket. Combinations your OCS graduation date. If I'm gone, don't trust the public ceremony. Follow the money. And if Lydia wraps this all in a Heritage Valor flag, you'll know exactly what it means. Start with her third-quarter filings they've never matched. You've always been the quiet one. But you've always had teeth. Dad? I read it twice. The room was silent, except for the low hum of the air conditioner. Evan met my eyes. "Looks like you have work to do." I didn't answer. I was already reaching for my jacket. The jacket was folded in the bottom of my duffel, still smelling faintly of desert sand and machine oil. My fingers slid into the inner chest pocket and touched cool metal. A small silver key dropped into my palm, its edges worn smooth. We were on the road before dawn. Midtown was quiet at that hour, the streets still damp from an overnight rain. My father's building was old brick with a brass buzzer that hadn't worked in years. No cameras in the hallway, no doorman. Just a plain beige door, marked 302. The lock turned easily. Inside, the air was stale, tinged with dust, and something medicinal. The apartment looked frozen in time coffee mug on the counter, unopened mail stacked on a side table. The safe was in the bedroom closet, behind a row of pressed shirts. I knelt, entered my OCS graduation date, and heard the bolt slide back. Inside lay a hard drive, a brown leather notebook, 2 thick printed reports, and a battered flip phone. The reports were quarterly financial filings for Heritage Valor Foundation. The numbers didn't match the public disclosures. Whole line items had been shifted into vague categories, medical equipment grants, and rehabilitation technology that led nowhere. I thumbed open the notebook. My father's handwriting filled the pages with lists of transactions, arrows connecting shell companies, and names I didn't recognize. Red ink circled certain entries: Orpheus Dynamics, Northstar Recovery, Blue Ridge Medical Imports. The flip phone had 3 numbers saved. One labeled Keller, another Latintra Briggs. The last was just a string of digits. Recent call logs showed outgoing calls 6 weeks before his death. Evan leaned over my shoulder. "This isn't sloppy fraud," he murmured. "This is layered like they expect to be audited and still pass." My gaze drifted to the hard drive. It wasn't encrypted, just folder after folder of labeled evidence emails, scanned invoices, photographs of shipping crates. In one photo, the crate bore a blue triangular logo. The manifest claimed it held mobility assistance frames. But I'd seen that logo before on equipment we'd seized overseas, the kind that required defense clearance. I closed the laptop and sat back. Whatever Lydia was doing with the foundation, it wasn't just stealing donations. She was moving military tech, through a charity's front door. And if my father died trying to stop it, I wasn't going to let his work end here. By the time we left Midtown, the sun had burned through the cloud cover, throwing hard light across the windshield. My father's notebook sat open on my lap, its pages fluttering with every bump in the road. Toward the back, I found a section titled Lydia, Pressure Points. Under it were bullet points, written in his tight, precise hand: audit panic, offshore account, Dubai, Dr. L, weak link, never trust her when she's kind. We stopped at a diner outside the city so Evan could pull the hard drive apart on his laptop without attracting attention. Between sips of bitter coffee, we pieced together the pattern. Lydia's foundation took donations from banned defense contractors, companies blacklisted for substandard parts or failed safety inspections. On paper, the gifts were equipment for rehab centers. In reality, they were high-value tech components rerouted overseas. It was more than laundering. It was distribution. A folder marked Medical Partners listed a Boston-based consultant, Dr. Lucinda Harper, as Heritage Valor's lead advisor for rehabilitation programs. But my father had circled her name twice and scrawled liability in the margin. If Harper knew the gear she was signing off on wasn't what the manifests claimed, she was part of the pipeline. Then came the file I almost didn't open: hospice records. 2 PDFs sat inside, one labeled official and one original. Both were my father's death certificate. But the details didn't match. In the official version, the time of death was moved forward by 2 days. The certifying physician was someone I'd never heard of, with no link to the hospice facility. And the morphine dosage listed was double the amount shown on the original chart. Evan's eyes met mine over the laptop screen. "That's not palliative care," he said quietly. "That's a kill dose." I stared at the lines of text until they blurred. The room seemed to shrink, pressing in from all sides. If Lydia had signed off on that falsified record, she hadn't just silenced my father's voice in the foundation, she'd ended his life to protect it. The weight in my chest hardened into something sharp. This wasn't only about stolen money or smuggled hardware anymore. It was murder. For a long time, I just sat there in the booth, the noise of the diner fading into a low hum. I'd seen betrayal before on deployment. You learned quickly who you could trust. But this was different. This was blood. Evan reached across the table, tapping the notebook. "What's your next move?" I closed the folder slowly. "She's hosting a memorial event next week at the Jefferson Conference Center. High-profile donors, a couple of foreign trade reps, defense contractors. If she's moving something, that's where it'll happen." He frowned. "You can't just walk in and shut it down. She'll have layers of security and friends in the right places. That's why I won't be walking in alone." That night, in the motel's dim light, I dug out an old contact book from my go bag. There were names in there I hadn't called in years, people who didn't ask why, only when. One of them owed me a favor that could burn in both directions. I dialed from a payphone at a gas station 30 miles away. The voice on the other end was calm, almost bored. "You still have clearance for Shadow Directive active," I said. "Requesting activation. Domestic threat logistics cover potential dual-use tech trafficking. Target Lydia Rowland." There was a pause, then a clipped reply. "Authorization confirmed. You'll have a 12-minute window on site. Send location and time." When I hung up, Evan was leaning against the rental car, arms crossed. 12 minutes. "That's all, it's all we'll need," I said. The next few days were a blur of quiet preparation. We changed motels twice, scrubbed our devices, and mapped every exit of the Jefferson Center. I memorized the staff rotations, catering load-in times, and the positions of every camera. Evan worked on intercepting the event's internal comms, a task he handled with unnerving patience. On the morning of the memorial, I pulled on civilian black, simple enough to blend, plain enough to move without notice. My dress blues stayed in the garment bag. This wasn't an official appearance. From the street outside, the building gleamed with glass and polished stone. Rows of American flags lined the entrance. Guests were already arriving, laughter and camera flashes spilling into the air. Somewhere inside, my sister was smiling for the press. And somewhere in the back halls, the real reason for this tribute was waiting to be wheeled out the door. We slipped in with a small group of attendees' badges hanging from lanyards we'd pulled off a printer the night before. Inside, the Jefferson Center smelled faintly of coffee and fresh paint. The main hall was staged to perfection, a broad dais, draped in deep blue screens, looping videos of veterans thanking Heritage Valor, and the casket flag from my father's service displayed like a centerpiece. I scanned the crowd. Lydia stood near the stage, shaking hands with a state senator. Her smile was camera-ready, but her eyes darted toward the VIP tent every few seconds. Evan's voice came through the earpiece. Loading bay, 2 men moving black crates with white tape. Same code from the manifests. I made my way toward the catering area, keeping my pace even. A QR scan on one crate brought up Mobility Assistance Frame. Donation batch 1459. But when I dug into the embedded tag, the real manifest read Gyroscopic Stabilization Units. Defense Application Level 3. She wasn't just moving charity gear, she was pushing restricted tech right under the flag. I circled back to the main floor. Lydia caught sight of me mid-conversation, her expression tightening for just a heartbeat before she put the smile back on. As I passed, I leaned in just enough for her to hear. "They're listening," I murmured. "And you're boxed in." Her smile didn't slip this time, but her eyes sharpened like glass. "You wouldn't." "I already did." I didn't wait for her answer. I moved toward the media van, parked at the side entrance, and keyed the mic clipped under my jacket. Target confirmed. Smuggling units on site. Initiate lock. From my vantage point, I saw the shift happen. 2 black SUVs rolled in from the east lot, slow and deliberate. The rear service gate swung open, and 3 figures in plain tactical gear moved through, no insignia, no wasted motion. Inside, conversations faltered. Keller, the man in half, the phone logs froze when the first agent approached. Lydia's posture stiffened. One agent held up a folder, said something too low to hear, and took the slim leather portfolio from her hand. This was the 12-minute window, and she had just run out of time. The room seemed to tilt as the agents closed in. No shouts, no drawn weapons, just a quiet precision that cut sharper than any scene on the evening news. Keller was guided toward the side exit, his protests muffled by the low hum of the crowd. 2 more agents flanked Lydia. She didn't fight, she didn't have to. Her silence was calculated the same way she used to win arguments at our parents' table, by making you fill the space with your own guilt. But this time, there was nothing I owed her. Camera flashes began only after the SUVs were already pulling away. By then the crates were sealed, the manifests logged, and the entire memorial reduced to a shell. Guests whispered to each other, trying to piece together what they'd just witnessed, their voices mixing disbelief with the awkward need to appear untouched by scandal. I stayed near the wall, letting the last seconds of the operation play out, without me in the frame. The next morning, her face was everywhere, front-page evening, broadcast news alerts on every phone. Veterans Charity founder arrested in military tech smuggling probe. Former donors issued statements of shock. Politicians who'd stood beside her at ribbon cuttings suddenly had no comment. 2 days later, I was called into a gray-walled conference room on base. The officer across from me slid a folder forward. "No disciplinary action," he said. "But you're reassigned to non-operational duties, effective immediately." Translation: "You did the right thing, but you embarrassed the wrong people." A week after that, we buried my father again, this time at Arlington, with full honors and his record restored. I stood alone by the folded flag, hearing his voice as if it were carried on the wind. "Your name is something you protect." And I had. I still wear the uniform every morning. Not because I expect applause, but because it reminds me why I can't let certain things slide. Letting them slide is how rot sets in quiet at first, then everywhere. Some people think service is all medals and speeches. My father knew better. Service is holding the line when it would be easier to look away. It's saying no to the comfortable lie, even when the truth will cost you. Lydia hasn't spoken to me since that day. I don't expect she ever will. That's fine. I didn't expose her to get even. I did it because my father deserved better than to have his life's work turned into a smuggling route. At Arlington, I set my hand on the cool triangle of the folded flag and made a promise to keep my name clean, to guard what he taught me, and to remember that silence in the face of betrayal is never neutral.